Welcome to Universal Theory, where the goal is to find a common language between the abstract and concrete. We are the unorthodox representation of physics and metaphysics. During the time that we have with you, we will discuss all that is potential and equally possible. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Trent.
And together, we are Universal Theory. We welcome you on this journey of scientific and metaphysical exploration, and we hope that any information that is conveyed or professed by either of us is of the utmost importance, value, and of practical use in your everyday lives.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Universal Theory. I'm your co-host, Trent, joined as always, Jordan. And as always, we have the merch on. By the time you see this video, the store should be up. So we will have it in the description below. Go check it out. Support us by flexing the merch and having the link tree on it. So if you're out and somebody's like, whoa, Universal Theory, that sounds cool. You can explain all about how cool it is and how cool we are and how cool it is to wear a big fake butt. Shout out to that guy.
Yeah, he's hilarious.
Yeah. But yeah, we're cool too. And we're looking for some thumbs up, you know. We are pouring ourselves into this. We hope you enjoy the content. If you do, please smash the thumbs up button and subscribe and share. Those are the three things. You know, buying merch is good for you, but at the end of the day, we're not in this for any kind of money. You know, that's not why we're doing this. We're in this to get the message out. So if it's buy merch or hit the thumbs up and share and subscribe, we'd much rather have you do that. Also, our Patreon is up, and what we're going to do there is have deeper dives into content. And as we've talked about, this long form version of our videos are going to be more data driven. So what we're going to do at Patreon, it's obviously not going to be pseudoscience now, but it'll be more of what we've experienced and more of kind of theory than it is just data. So yeah, over there, and we'll get into the nitty gritty, and we'll get into the things that 35 minutes over here just we can't even begin to touch. So content will be up there. Actually, the science guy is already up over there on Patreon, and he liked some of our videos, and in order to empathize, which we'll be talking about later, he shared us some of his videos. So we're going to share them with you. Take a look.
Bam, yeah, what's up, Western Yogi? Got the West Side mudras popping off, you know what I'm saying? Like, fresh about the shower, no monkey business, you know, popping tags, pop. Western Yogi here, tapping into my animal chi.
Oh, is that the Western Yogi?
Hey, what's up? What's poppin'? You know what I'm saying? Just concentrating on my formula I've been working on, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I seen that. What's it say?
Yeah, it's E equals MC triangle.
Isn't it E equals MC squared?
Nah, cause I don't have any squares in my circle.
Yeah, that guy. We are kindred spirits. I can empathize 100% with what he's going through because of the misnomers in science, which we're going to get into because of polarization. This is season 1, episode 5. I can't believe we're already doing episode 5. It's moving quick. We've only got a few principles left. So polarity is they're all great. They're all great principles in my mind. It's one of the ones where, yes, you can be practical with quite a few examples, but it's the principle when you start to think about it itself is pretty simple. So when you go to explain polarity, it's like, oh, well, you have a magnet and a positive and a negative, and in between, the end. It's not like these other things where it's very, very intricate and you have to get into it. Granted, it applies to intricate situations. Just one of the ones that kind of make more sense is polarity. And while we're talking about the science guy and while we're here, some misnomers in science. One of them, because I just mentioned positive and negative, if you look at, an atom, you might think, oh, an electron and a proton they must be on two sides of the on the opposite sides of the spectrum, right? And no, they do have polarity when it comes to charge, where one is positive and one is negative, but the two particles themselves are not. There's actually something called a positron. And a positron, when it meets an electron, they annihilate each other, right? No more mass, and the energy is converted into photons. And this will be a reoccurring theme that we see is two sides to the same, right? When the two poles come together, it creates something new, and that new thing is polarized itself. We can't escape that. That's why it's a principle. And this new thing from the electron and the positron is the photon, but the photon oscillates in the electric and the magnetic fields. So we still see this dual nature, even down to something as fundamental as a photon. And another awesome fact about when these electrons and positrons come together and annihilate each other, that is the rippling of the fields. That is the quantum fluctuations. When we talk about, in the last episode, how everything vibrates, well, that everything vibrating even down into empty space, what's causing that vibration is the electron and the positron and other particle and antiparticles coming together and annihilating. And it never allows, and they pop in and out of existence so fast that conservation laws are fine with it. So it's pretty, there's always that with science, right? Like, as long as it happens in a short amount of time and energy's still conserved, that's fine. It's fine if it's a little mystic. And it definitely is science. We got you on your tails. No, hey, I'm a scientist at heart. So, but there's always room for one miracle in science, and then the rest, it's all got to be facts. One other misnomer that we know about in quantum physics is quantum entanglement. And I'm sure you've seen the videos on social media. You're going to stop doing them. I'm just smacking them out of existence right now. Please stop watching those. Just listen to us. We'll set you straight. So what they say is that, essentially quantum entanglement is happening everywhere, and that quantum entanglement is stuff that it isn't. What quantum entanglement is essentially when you have a pair of an electrons that are entangled, when you measure one, and let's say that it has spin up, so just imagine something spinning a certain way. The other thing is going to be spinning the opposite way in order to conserve a quantity called angular momentum. So there are certain quantities like energy that have to be conserved. And that's all that's happening here, is that this quantity is now conserved when I can teleport back to the mothership into another body, and I'm calling that quantum entanglement or whatever you're hearing about on social media. That's not what quantum entanglement is. Quantum entanglement stops the moment it's measured and not observed. When a scientist says observed, another misnomer, we'll just get this one out the way. It doesn't mean that we're actually looking at it with our eyeballs and now consciousness is the reason everything exists. Do I think that's true? Sure. In essence, right? But I don't subscribe to the fact that because it's not true, that something, when I look at it, leaves the state of entanglement and now it is an electron, right? It has to be measured by a device that it interacts with, and then it measures it, and then the other part of that entanglement, of that entangled pair, is going to be the opposite. So now that those misnomers have been cleared and I've made, thousands of people mad, well, hundreds if you're watching this, I'll let Jordan elaborate.
People on their couch.
Yeah, exactly.
That accidentally found us. I hate these guys.
Yeah.
So polarity. I want to talk about what he finished off with in misnomers and quantum entanglement, and how a lot of metaphysicians will automatically run to quantum entanglement to validate mystical premises, such as telepathy or telekinesis or teleportation, or the transference of a soul to a novel body that we grew in a laboratory and have under some type of breathing apparatus or something.
Yeah.
So telepathy could actually be a real thing, and it's not to say that I haven't had my own telepathic experiences or coincidences, things coinciding, not that they randomly happen, because I don't subscribe to randomness, but stick to the data. So telepathy could be a thing, and we do produce electrical currents in our brain and our body, and our organs are electrical, and our cells are electrical, and then we have magnetic currents in our brain and our body, and our organs and our cells are magnetic. And so we do, at least in theory, we produce these currents that can potentially interact with the field and potentially cause a collapse of a given situation from our thoughts. But we can't automatically jump to saying that it is quantum entanglement and this is the science that validates it and we're all entangled and we're all one. It's not to say that we're not all entangled from the standpoint that we are all one because of the field. And then we all are one because all of these particles that we are comprised of are interacting with all the sum total of all the other particles in the entire universe. So there is a grid that we're connected to from the standpoint of the wave and the standpoint of the particle and the standpoint of us sharing the same space and breathing the same oxygen or sharing the same planet. All of these things are true, but we have to stick with the data and we have to do the necessary research. If you think scientists are not out here doing the research, then you need to go to college or you need to get grants somehow. And you need to get a laboratory and you need to start doing these experiments, because you can do them on psychedelics and you can do them on ketamine and you can do them on LSD and all these other drugs and stimulants that may allow you to have these mystical experiences. But it has to become a tangible science that can be validated abroad. And that's how it becomes a theory.
Yeah, the academics are, speaking of polarity, are polarized, right, to the scientific method and the way that they do things, right? They're polarized in that nature. They're strict in that nature. And I think what Jordan is saying is it's time for the mystics and the people who understand these other worlds to start doing these experiments. Because when we start doing these experiments and we see how studious these scientists are, but then we start applying that same principle to these studies that are a bit more fringe, we'll have something, right? We'll have something to hold on to and say, hey, I can visit these other worlds. They're starting to do that with ayahuasca, and they're mapping out because multiple people are taking it and they're using the scientific method and they're saying, oh, I saw the same thing here. I did, and let's go through it and do it that way. It's not that we can't do that when we have mystical experiences. We think we don't have to, but then it's harder to validate that information when you don't. And that's why scientists do it, because in that validation, it creates a solid foundation.
Yes, to reason from. Because if we're going into these worlds, we want to properly navigate them, and we also don't want to apply general methods in general and expect them to work 100% of the time.
Yeah.
If you want more accuracy, yes, you have to have a general method that can be applied to the general populace, but you also have to be able to manipulate this method so that each individual can use it to enhance their experience. And we want to know what brain centers are being activated, because we can learn to control that. We can polarize those brain centers naturally without using a stimulant like some of the ancient masters did. They were scientists and they investigated these things and they wrote down data. That data is called scripture. So when you're reading a scripture that was written in a very sophisticated but ancient language, and they have letters that are symbols that have an innumerable amount of concepts behind them, they were using the scientific method, but they didn't have the tools that we have today.
Yeah.
They were the tools, but now let's apply those biological tools, polarity, to the technological tools.
Yeah.
One pole to another. So we went from being the technology to creating the technology.
Yeah, and we talked about the electric field an episode or two ago, and mystics have known about the aura and how there's more to the body than what we see. And if those same mystics would have just started doing what the scientist does, we probably could have got to the point where we're at now much sooner, right? So it's not like it's the scientist versus the mystic scientist. No. We're all working together, but it's just, the holistic, it's the left brain and the right brain. It's being able to utilize both. We've talked about this as well. We don't ever want to just do things halfway. When we look at the yin and the yang, it's so profound because it's whole, not because it's one side or the other side.
Exactly. And like I said, they had wrote down the data that they had accumulated. And if we think about those individuals, let's say reincarnation is a thing. So let's say those individuals come back in new bodies. Do you think that they would approach it in the same light that they did before? Or would they be curious and would they be astonished at the technology that we have developed? And would they not want to use this technology to make advances in these specific fields because they were the original researchers?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, you would think that curiosity is the reason why the mystic headed down the path that they headed down. So if you're going to come back, that curiosity is still going to be there. That ability to tap in is still going to be there. And now you have this person who is, I can experience the same thing that I felt in a previous lifetime, but now I can put on a cap and I can measure what parts of the brain are firing. I mean, that is so powerful when we start to move into the next 100 years and we're starting to study what causes what parts of the brain to fire, is being able to then take the mystical experience and reproduce it. I mean, they have the God helmet, right? Which all they do is change the magnetic field, which, as we know, right, magnets, have the polarity, positive and negative, and they're just changing that magnetic field around that part of the brain, and it makes you believe in God, right? It makes you, it just gives you this awe, and yes, that there's a God. So something as small and trivial as that, I mean, once we start to map out the parts of the brain that are firing when we're on these other spiritual experiences, it's really going to open the door for the people like my wife who just haven't experienced them. They could go and have a spiritual experience and it could change their life. It could not. They could go back to business as usual, but in the back of their head, they'll always know that what other people are talking about is real.
Yes, they created a technological way of inducing the experience to break the ice, so to speak.
Yeah.
Same way with psychedelics. In ancient times, they would give the mystics, the initiates, they would give them psychedelics. And not like the masters wouldn't take it, but they can regulate the cerebral activity and the involuntary mechanisms of the body controlling different organs. They could do this voluntarily with their own volition, but for the student or the mystic or the initiate, the one who's coming into these gifts, they may need to break the ice sometimes to pierce the veil, so to speak.
Yeah.
And piercing the veil is just enhancing the experience. So we're not talking about some type of weird mystical experience that may or may not be real, or it's just the delusion that you're suffering from because of abnormal brain chemistry. We're talking about the advancement of the experience, the enhancement of the sensibilities to not seek to control the perception as much as to witness it.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and like we're talking about polarity. All we're trying to do is polarize that experience. We're trying to give that individual that's experiencing maybe little bumps here and there, right? If you're looking at an ordinary experience versus a spiritual experience, it's not like they happen in different realms. They happen within the same mind, within the same person. So there's a connection there, and it's what is that connection? How do these two things, how are they one? Other than they happen within the mind. And if we know where they fire in the mind, if an individual is laying towards ordinary, and we can push it along that pole more towards, spiritual experience, more towards the oneness of it all, then that could, like Jordan said, give that person perspective. So it's all about finding these opposites that exist and transmuting. And when we talk about transmuting energy, what we're talking about is taking it and moving it somewhere, sliding it along that pole, because when you transmute something, you can move it right transversely and you can move it down to a different pole. But I'm not going to, for the most part, when you're transmuting something, you are moving it up and down the two sides of that pole. You're not jumping to a whole nother pole.
Yes.
The ancients, the masters know how to do that. They know how to take something and change perspective, and now you're on a different pole. But for the common person, it's going to be, this person is being negative. How do I transmute that from being negative into positive? And Jordan and I were talking about emotions and apathy and empathy, and how is apathy real? Could apathy be real? Would it be apathy or the lack of feelings on one side, and empathy where you can literally put yourself in somebody's shoes on the other side? And it's like, well, does anybody really not feel anything? And for people out there that say yes, I'm sure you feel hungry when you don't eat. I'm sure that you feel sad when you lose your job. So you might not feel anything for the person in another country who is starving, right? Because you don't know about it. And even if you see it, it's like karma or whatever reason that you come up with, but you still feel something, right? So it's this whole, the idea of the absence of something just doesn't really exist in our universe.
Exactly, and it stems from our lack of comprehension of the principles, in this case polarity, and to pair it with something, vibration. We just had the conversation about vibration and how if it doesn't vibrate, it doesn't exist. Every organism, like you said earlier when we discussed this, has biochemical means of sensing the environment and processing data. This is what we call feelings. And feelings can happen equal in nature, different in degree, from one polarity or one extremity to the other. One is humanoids. We have, like primates and other animals, we have systems of reciprocity. We can reciprocate from amoebas to humans. We have reciprocity. But humans are on one extremity of the pole, where you have primates have been shown to have empathy for other primates and even other animals. They can empathize with them to their own degree. But humans can do something that no other species can do, other than some species I've never heard of, or an alien that might be more advanced than us. But because someone's like, there's something. It's like, yeah, there's something out there. I don't know what it is, but hey, I'm sure it exists. Infinite possibilities. So humans can have empathy abstraction. We can empathize with a rock. You're not going to catch another species empathizing with something as small or something as an inanimate object, a rock, a TV, a television show, a made-up a cartoon, a teddy bear. We can empathize with air. We could be like, we could look at it under a microscope and it looks like it's getting damaged.
Right.
And then we're like, oh wow. Or you can put a box, you can draw a box, and then you can put a circle and a square and a triangle in a box, and you can make one looks like it's running and one looks like it's being attacked or being cornered, and they're just objects.
Yeah.
But we can empathize with that. So it's like there is, I would dare argue that there's no such thing as apathy.
Yeah.
By definition, where it's the absence of feeling. I would say that apathy, if we change the definition, apathy means less feeling and empathy means more or most feeling, and then somewhere in between will always be sympathy.
Yeah, or no feeling towards a specific event. Because
Yes.
I do believe that you could feel indifferent about a specific event, like what Jordan was just describing. If you did see it, maybe someone does feel empathy for it, but someone else could look at it and be like, I don't know, it's a square and some triangles. I don't care. I'm going to keep moving, right? So, I mean, maybe that feeling of indifferent, you could argue, is a feeling, but then it gets down to semantics. I think what we're trying to say is it's, as a whole, you're going to slide on that emotional scale towards caring a lot or caring a little to getting upset, or, you know, like, I don't care. But you can, I'm sure that there's something that fires in the brain that's saying, I don't care, as we were talking about earlier. So you can't escape that. You're not going to escape that slide up and down. And the way that it's shown in nature that we can't escape this is a magnet. So when you have a magnet, and I'm sure someone's done it right at home, where you cut the magnet in half. I know I have. You cut it in half, and what's crazy is now you have two little magnets. It's not like you have a positive and a negative anymore. You have a positive and a negative and a positive and a negative, and then you break those in half, and now you have 4 magnets, and you break those in half, and now you have 8 magnets. All the way down. You can do this all the way down to the atomic scale, and the electrons will place themselves in such a way that you have a positive side and a negative side. And right now, I know for a fact that CU Denver is a part of a organization that is getting funded from the government millions of dollars to try to find this thing called a magnetic monopole. They're going down to the nanometers in scale, right, 10 to the negative 9, and trying to see if they can find something that is just positive or just negative as it exists in nature, and it doesn't. So that shows you that you cannot escape this. And if you say, oh, well, Trent, what about an electron? And it's like, yeah, there are charges that exist as particles as just positive or negative, but there aren't magnets. There is nothing that affects the magnetic field that is just positive or negative. It doesn't exist, a magnetic monopole. And if it does, we've spent the past couple decades searching for it, and we'll continue to. And even my professor who's on the team is like, I no longer believe it exists. I'm just here to perfect the technology, because this technology, where we're literally measuring nanometers, can be used in so many other applications in science. But yeah, I mean, even the guy whose whole life has been around finding them, he's given up. So, you know, let us know in the comments down below, though, if you think that there is a way to escape polarity, or if you think that there is a way to escape any of the principles, really. Let us know down in the comments below. We'd love to hear, you know, your opinion on this subject, and if we're missing something, right, that's profound, that's maybe just escaped us.
Well, one thing I would say is, when we're talking about polarity, there's infinite different types of polarity, and infinite different ways of looking at it, because each pole is technically infinite, because it has infinite potential. Maybe not in capacity, but in potential. And you do get rid of poles when we talk about it from an absolute sense. So that would be something someone could argue.
Sure.
So we have absolute polarity, and then we have relative polarity, infinite polarity, finite polarity, and then we have circumstantial polarity. So, and then you have polarity of arbitrary polarity versus natural polarity. So there's multiple different ways of looking at it. So if it's natural, we talked about this, the seed of a plant produces specific fruit. And it's not going to randomly produce unless we genetically modify it or drastically change its environment and put it under pressure and cause it to produce new genomic properties. Apple seeds are going to produce apples. Orange seeds are going to produce oranges, and so on. So you're not going to randomly get an apple tree that produces oranges unless someone's altered the polarity. Mm-hmm. And that would be more of a natural occurrence. Yeah. And then you have something where it's not a natural occurrence, and we do modify the polarity, and then you do get oranges on apple trees.
Yeah, and that's true, and that's where we're intervening, right? If we intervene, all we're doing is we know we're intervening. We know we're changing the polarity. And, to your point from the absolute sense, I think that, to escape polarity, you have to escape it entirely. Because even from an absolute sense, God would be comprised of everything that exists on these poles. So it's, as above, so below. Using the principle of correspondence, you would just say, well, God obviously exists. He exists within polarity because God is comprised of polarity. So
yes, the wave, and that's what I was getting at. To elaborate, going back to the absolute polarity is, like he said, the sum total of all of these poles would create a negation of the poles, where it would be a singular pole, if you could imagine that, which you can, I'm sure, if you go into meditation and you go deep enough, you can imagine that there are no poles, and every pole is a singular pole, and those poles are an infinite pole, and you could annihilate that principle in that sense, but only because it's a summation of all of these polarities. Like he said, it's not because there's an absence of it. Yeah. It's because there's so much of the presence of it.
Yeah.
Same way with vibration, same way with any of the principles. So if you're a smart guy and you're in the comments and you came up with that conclusion.
Yeah, you have time to back out though. You don't have to hit send. You're typing it as we're finishing the video.
Yeah, like, oh wow, okay, well. Because they're saying, well, what about, duality? This is a dualistic paradigm in this universe. And it's like, yes, because all forms of duality equal non-duality.
Yeah.
That's how that works. It's not like you just cast the principle to the side and said, I don't need this boat anymore. I'm going to walk on water. It's like, okay, well, now there's a polarity between you and the water. So.
Or like when you cut the corners off of a square
and make the circle,
and then cut into a C, and you lock the truth down.
Yes, because that's what we're doing right now.
That's the polarity. Is locking the truth down.
Polar sides to these handcuffs.
Western yogi, I promise you taught us something.
Mm-hmm. Very wise man. So, and then you have the polarity of non-polarity or absolute polarity versus relative polarity. Those two are polar opposites.
Yeah.
The wave collapsing into a particle, that creates polarity. And then those particles have polarity. And then the things that they comprise have polarity. If we compare ourselves to magnets, instead of chopping it in half, we add them together, we get polarity. So it's like the inverse choppage of a magnet to comprising magnets. Now you have a body that has magnetic crystals in it and has iron in it, which can be magnetized. Mm-hmm. So you have a magnetic pole of north and south in the human body.
Yep.
And then you have the two poles between male and female now.
Yep.
So now the law of attraction, because these two poles are bound to meet. Mm-hmm. And then they produce sperm and ova. And then that produces a child, which that child has polarity. And then that child is polarized in the womb through what the mother eats and drinks and what she thinks and feels. And that polarizes the epigenome. And then that child's telomeres are polarized now, where they're going to be longer or shorter normally in life based upon how traumatic the experience was or how, biochemically beneficial it was to the child.
Right.
And then the child's polarized to the environment. So there's an infinite amount of ways to look at how polarity can be viewed. The polarity between me and this camera and me and this microphone, the polarity between us being on camera and being on YouTube and having a podcast and you viewing it.
Yeah.
That is a polarity.
Yeah. Polarity is, relative, just like all the other principles, right? And it's definitely one of the ones where you can give quite a few examples of it. But then once you understand what it is, and you probably already do, because polarity is something that has presented itself in nature and it's a big part of science. So you probably already have seen it. So I feel like this principle hopefully is one that this podcast just helped kind of solidify what we were talking about and what you read in the Kybalion. I think they do a great job explaining it in the Kybalion as well. And yeah, as far as, closing thoughts for this principle, it is one of the principles that is very much everywhere that you look. But remember, just like with correspondence, you need to be careful with how you use it, and it needs to be two sides to the same thing. Jordan's example is extreme with the apple tree and the peach tree, but in order to jump from one to the other, there has to be some sort of intervention that changes it fundamentally. It's not naturally an apple peach tree. So when you're using this principle, just remember that. Just keep that in mind when you're trying to compare two different objects. You have to be able to see it from one end to the other and every variation in between.
Yes. And once you can navigate the proper usage of polarity, where you can look at the nature of something and then you can see the difference in degree as a tree to a seed. By nature, they're the same, but one is the actual origin of the unfoldment of the tree, the origin of the process of the unfoldment of the tree. But the tree is inside of the seed. Literally, not like the literal tree, but what the tree will become, like the genetic properties that allow the tree, the genetic properties of what the tree is literally inside of the seed. So once you can see that, then you can start using it in a bunch of novel different ways. Like I had showed some examples, but one of the best examples for closing thoughts that I could think of for polarity is polarizing your finger down to that like button.
They are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
your finger in that like button. You might as well just give in and go ahead and push it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's gonna be your new thing. I think we'll just every principle we can somehow find a way to tie it into hitting the like and subscribing, please.
Exactly.
And it's all love over here. If any examples that we gave today in any way offended you, let us know in the comment section. We will clarify. We're up here trying to paint pictures for you in order to help live your lives in a more. We're trying to help you polarize your life in a more harmonious manner.
Yes, exactly.
We love you. Peace.
Yeah, don't talk to me, it's off to me, assault police. The artistry's my carpentry, it's carpeting for all of these false MCs. I chalk the scene, I'm Charlie Sheen. I darken dreams, the carpet bleeds, my pauper leaves a scar in your whole face like a Carter scene. I go hard cause the car to me, you ain't hard as he, or the yard hate. Bar hate, it's the Nazarene, choking line with a main, I'm a martyr king. Yeah, I'm a god, so it's all with me. Pull at your heart, I'm chewing at your arteries. Damn, for the artistry, the artist bleeds, I'm martyring your darling. It's all with me, get lost at sea. Shout the priest, stomp the beast, I do not play, it's often seen. I'm off the boat, got a blade on me, homie, I'm off the go. I don't know, but you niggas put them off the dose, or off the smoke, a cough, a choke, a puke up a coffin toe, with a whole body in it like a mafia joke. Off the coast like mafios, my posse grows like poppy fields. Got a Glock on my side, but it's not the quote. I got the tree, I got the rope, I got the crown, I got the throne. I'm not the Pope, I am the Lord, goddamn your soul. The gamut grows, the ganja pose, a cannon show. Loud, I'm a blast like my hand and drone. I control the whole globe with a Thanos glove. Jewels on my wrist from the planet dust. You're messing with a god like I am the code. I am the code, the camera froze, they cannot cope. They plan to post, but I'ma kill them all. With the plan I wrote, the antidote, the man I spoke. I gave him life, but I'ma end them all. I'ma ram and close the brand and palm volcanic rhymes. The man I lie, the fans are spawns, I chant the rhyme. My clan's a god, you cannot stop the Metatron, the messenger. The Messiah, the master of the last of dawns, the mastodon, the razor-tooth dragon that'll blast your pawns and make your king disappear with a magic wand. Be gone. The path them on, get a wrapped in gauze and ripped by claws and smash your skull. Your pass baton, the gap is large. I'm way too far. I'm past the stars, galactic bars, the acid pause. I rap in fours and tundra sword. The guns on board, Wakanda Lord, the jungle boy. You come some more, come for war. and I made the mongrels mourn. I'm hungry for the lungs of yours, your tongue's in cold, my stomach roars. I munch on gores, running force, the hunter's board, hunt for sport, slap a pole and punch a horse.
So baby,